Hey everybody, welcome to the Sales Enablement video training session with Frank Cowell and
Erika Carmichael.
we're glad to have you with us here today. So you've probably just started your inbound program with Elevator, and you probably have just had your conversation with your account strategist about how to have amazing results with inbound marketing. But the thing that makes all of this work really well, right, Erika, is inbound sales.
Of course.
And so what we want to do is we want to help you guys out with some tips and recommendations on how you can create that bridge between marketing and sales, what we like to call smarketing.
Mm-hmm. That alignment is so important internally to your organization.
Absolutely, so critical. So you may have talked about a service level agreement between sales and marketing. You may have had that discussion already, and you may have heard the phrase smarketing, but we're going to talk a little bit about that today. Specifically, we want to go through the workbook that you were given, right? And so we want to go through that and give you our tips and recommendations for how to interface with your sales team and how to get the most out of your inbound program.
Right.
Ready to jump in?
I'm ready.
Let's do this. We're just going to have a real casual conversation today. Okay, so let's talk about the elements of sales enablement, Erika. So the first topic we have are tripwires. Can you tell me what a tripwire is in your opinion?
Yeah, so a tripwire is like a mini offer, and there's going to be some exchange, and usually it's just an exchange of an email address, maybe something a little bit more than that. It's just going to be something small that is provided by your sales team in exchange for something from the lead.
Great. So give me an example of that. Like, what might that be?
So for us, for Elevator, a tripwire might be some small assessment, a consultation, something that you can provide to them, provide value in exchange for usually some time.
Some time. Okay, so that's kind of critical, right, to a tripwire, is that the tripwire should really change the nature of the relationship.
Right.
Not just attending a webinar, for example, where they're spending some time, but to where they're getting on the phone with you. Mm-hmm. They're doing some sort of
human-to-human interaction, right?
Absolutely. So we highly recommend that you guys develop a tripwire in your organization. And that tripwire should have a natural alignment from the action they took on your website to whatever this engagement is. So if they engaged on topic A, then the tripwire, the consultation, the mini engagement should be around topic A.
Right.
So you have perfect alignment. So we highly recommend that you develop these next step low or no cost engagement offers that are based on these topics of interest. You also want to kind of treat this like a product, right?
It's great if you have a short name so it's easy to reference, easy to remember.
Yeah, give it a description. Unlike the products that you have in your organization that have names and features and benefits, you know, put some description around this so when people are calling and pitching this and trying to get these appointments, you know, you're presenting real value. Even though it's free in many cases, it's a product nonetheless.
Yeah, and it's really helpful also for a salesperson if you have some tips or quick lines about what the person can expect as a result of this tripwire. So just those quick talking points can be really beneficial when you're picking up the phone.
Great, awesome. So sometimes your prospects may not take you up on your tripwire offer. Right? So you want to have your automated follow-up recommend this tripwire offer as well as your sales team following up. So you have, you know, coming at it from a couple different directions. But sometimes even a tripwire engagement may seem like a little...
too much too soon.
Exactly. Took the words right out of my mouth.
There you go.
So we have what we call micro offers that we recommend.
Right.
So talk to me a little bit about micro offers. What are they and why do you want to have them?
So whereas a tripwire may be human-to-human interaction, a micro offer sometimes doesn't even need that level of engagement. So for example, for Elevator, a micro offer may be running your website through a website grader. Where we can just do all of that online, we can communicate via email, send them back that report, and they're still getting value from our interaction, from our engagement. But at this point, we're not asking them to jump on the phone for 30 minutes, 60 minutes, still very low touch at that point.
Yeah, we like to call these just say yes kind of offers. So for example, you might offer to do a competitive analysis. An analysis of what's going on in their marketplace and in their environment. And all they have to do is just say yes and provide the names of their top 3 competitors.
Yep.
And so a just say yes kind of offer is what we call a micro offer. And it's a way to just get engagement going to where you're providing value still. And I think that's the important part of all this is all along the path, your content, your lead generation offers, And now through your sales process, you still must provide value.
Right.
Right? Gone are the days where you just need to like get a general like coffee appointment and let's see if we can pitch you. You need to be providing value every step of the way.
Right. And when Frank says a just say yes offer, that's literally the extent of the offer, right? So if you're making an email to a lead, literally all that lead has to do in return is reply yes to get that micro offer. It's that simple.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things you can add to your sales process right away that can get you in better alignment with your inbound marketing, so you have more of what we call an inbound sales methodology.
Right. And sometimes these micro offers already exist within your company. They can be tools that the sales team is already using to make their job even easier.
Awesome. Cool. So now let's talk about deal pipelines. Now this gets into an area that if you're a marketer and you're listening to this, you may or may not be able to affect a lot of change here. But if you do have the voice of the sales team, or you do have that kind of influence, or you are on the sales team, we want to talk about deal pipelines. And one of the things that we found is when you have a deal pipeline that is just one pipeline for every lead that comes in that hopefully will become an opportunity, what ends up happening is you get a lot in your pipeline that isn't relevant or real value. It's not monetarily an opportunity yet.
Right.
So we recommend at minimum 2 pipelines. One pipeline is what we would call the tripwire pipeline. In other words, you get a new lead in and they become marketing qualified, and at that point they end up on the sales team's side in this tripwire pipeline. And in this pipeline, the only goal of the pipeline is to get the appointment, to get the tripwire to take place. This particular pipeline has no revenue associated with it. Its only milestone is the appointment is scheduled, a qualified appointment is scheduled.
Correct.
Talk to me a little bit about your experience with a tripwire pipeline. How does that work for you here at Elevator, and what are some tips that you might give?
Yeah, so the way that our tripwire pipeline looks, when a lead comes in, after it's been scrubbed on the marketing side, it gets passed over to the sales side. At that point, it's called an MQL. I have to do some further investigation to make sure that it's still a good criteria fit for Elevator. And so once we get beyond that, now I want to start engaging with that lead. That connection phase, of course, is really important that we have insights to what that lead cares about. If it's a certain track that if it's they've identified as interesting for them, that's really important. And we'll even take a look at other places like LinkedIn to find out what are their interests that what are their groups that they belong to, so we can speak more intelligently when we jump on the phone with them. Throughout each of the attempts that I'm trying to make with a lead in this pipeline, I always want to be providing value. So of course you always want to try to aim for that tripwire right away, right? That free consultation, that free assessment, getting them on the phone. But as your attempts continue, whether it's your 5th, your 10th, your 15th attempt with this lead, you may want to change up the way that you are communicating with them. Either way, at every stage, it's really important that you know what you're going in for, you know what you're asking. So always having those important sound bites or sound bites that include hot button words for that lead can be really important as well. But if you set up the deal pipeline, the biggest benefit that I think is you can see where your leads are trending through the stages. And that's really powerful because if you have a full pipeline at this stage in the game, you'll be set in the future as you get to your next pipeline, which Frank will talk about in a bit.
Yeah, and Erika mentioned providing value above and beyond just trying to win the free consult, so to speak. We have here at Elevator a tip sheet, right? So that the person who's making the phone calls to try to get these appointments, they have a tip matrix. So based on the prospect's pain point and the topic of interest, we have a way to start giving them value even through that process. So that way we can build that trust. So they want to spend, an hour on the phone with us.
Right, right.
Cool. So that leads into the next pipeline. So the value of the first pipeline is that you can now measure the percentage of MQLs that result in a free consult, whatever that tripwire is for your organization. And that's a really important piece of the pie to measure, a piece of the journey, if you will, to measure. You want to know what that conversion is from MQL to tripwire. So that's important. The next one at minimum you want to have is the core offer funnel. This is now, once they're an opportunity, they're on their way to potentially engaging with you in a serious contract.
Right.
So talk to me about some things we're doing here at Elevator that would be helpful for our audience in terms of tips and recommendations around a core offer funnel.
Yeah, so as Frank mentioned, right now we're recommending that you try to tackle 2 different deal pipelines. For elevator, we've mastered the
Yeah.
two. So we've actually inserted a secondary pipeline, which is a small paid engagement. For many of you who are watching this today, your core offer might be a very large investment for an organization to make. So even going just from that free consult to a $250,000 engagement can be a really big step. So just as a side tip, the way that Elevator does it, we have a small middle engagement, which is only a few $1,000s, but it's what we call, it's a planning type of engagement where we're going through and uncovering goals, challenges, and walking through that with the client. Now, if you are able to get right from a free consult into your core services or to your core offering, that's fantastic. The way that we would go about that then is uncovering in a free manner all of those pain points, those goals and challenges, and then walking them through a predefined sales funnel to get them to that core presentation, that proposal, and then eventually agreements.
Great. So again, if you can affect this kind of change with the sales team, that's fantastic. Hopefully you have buy-in from both the sales side and your executive team, so you can create this kind of alignment and make recommendations for these two pipelines.
Right.
This will really help you track the success of your overall program.
Of course.
But I think the whole point of this is really underscoring the importance of the alignment between the two sides of the house.
I agree.
In fact, they shouldn't be two sides of the house. They should all be in one house.
Together.
Yeah, same bedroom,
Yeah.
if possible.
Happy family.
Yes, yes, one big bedroom. Okay, so let's talk about lead follow-up. This is now on the sales side and how you might be able to use some of the technology, some of the tools that are available in programs like HubSpot to be able to enable better follow-up once you're doing kind of that one-to-one follow-up. So let's talk about lead follow-up waves or sequences. What are some of the recommendations for follow-up there and how they can standardize and make this more efficient?
Yeah, so just to kind of make sure we're all in the same place in our workbook, this is still one of those setup activities. So once you set up your waves and sequences, you should be able to use them. They should have legs, right? You should be able to use them for quite a long time unless you're going to start adding in additional micro offers or tripwires. But essentially, the way that you should set up your waves is to first go after that tripwire, right? You really want to, that's your main goal, is to get them on the phone with a salesperson as quickly as possible. Now, after your first initial attempts, if you can't get them there, then I would resort to a few different micro offers to try to get them to engage and then circle back on that tripwire again. So really, when you're creating these sequences, there are a series of different offers and then also a series of activities. And it's those activities that are also very important. So for Elevator, some of those activities are following them on LinkedIn, following them on Twitter, finding the organization and following the organization at large, and also picking up the phone, right? So if you've made a recommendation that they take you up on your tripwire, give them a phone call so they get to know your voice, they get to know your name, and all of that can create a really warm interaction so that once they do finally engage, it's like they kind of already know you.
Fantastic. So that's great. So we recommend setting up 4 to 6 weeks of follow-up and at least one wave per week. And what we would mean by wave is no less than 3 touches, whether that's a phone call or 2 emails, 2 phone calls and an email, but no less than 3 touches per week for 4 to 6 weeks.
Right. And so, I mean, at the very end of the day, you probably have between 15, 20, 25 outreaches on a single lead. And then what's really great is once you set up all of these waves, what you'll be able to uncover is where people are getting the most interaction. So are most of the leads converting at the very beginning of the waves? Is there a certain micro offer that's really enticing, that's getting people to engage? Is it the very end of the, like, you'll start to understand because of the way that you're setting up these sequences, where you have the most traction. And that's great insight.
Good. Good, that's awesome. That's really awesome. So there are a lot of simple things you can do to really bridge the gap between leads have come into your database, now we need to get them activated. We need to get them engaged.
Right.
So what we've just talked about is really the setup process of the sales enablement workbook that you were provided. Now let's talk about the ongoing activities. Once you've set things up, some of the things that you can do to make all of this work. Let's talk about lead scrubbing, which is a role that not too many people talk about. We kind of see this as a marketing function. If you have it take place within your sales team, that's fine too. The important thing is that it takes place and that it's someone's job and that it happens in a very timely manner.
Right.
So what is lead scrubbing, Erika?
So lead scrubbing is whoever that individual is within your organization taking a look at the lead that came in and completing as much information about that lead so that there's context for the sales team. So for example, if a lead comes into the database and all that you've asked on the form as a result is just their first name, last name, company, and email address. Maybe you didn't even ask for their company, maybe you just asked for their email address. And being able to deduce from that information more about that lead. So you might know the domain because of the email address, right? So you know what company they work for. You may be able to look up that company online and find out that their annual revenue is between $50 and $100 million a year.
Good info to know, right?
Very great. You might also be able to find on LinkedIn that that person is the VP of Sales and Marketing. Also very good information to know. And so whoever's role this is within the company, what they would be able to do is create a full picture of who this lead is based on information that's already public knowledge online. But in that case, the salesperson doesn't have to go and do that legwork. What they're given when they're receiving this MQL is a pretty fleshed out profile.
Yeah, and so what we're talking about is a human actually getting involved in this process. So that way you can ask just a little bit of information on your lead generation form, which is going to keep the lead gen form from being a barrier to conversion. So you want to ask things like first name, last name, email, and we often ask two other pieces, which is what is your role and company size? So 5 form fields, it's not too daunting, especially if the value's there. But then to build out the rest of it, we just have a person on our team actually go out and get this info. So when it gets handed over to sales, it's been qualified out that it is actually MQL.
Yeah.
And in your document, you have a sample process on how to go about scrubbing these leads. This is just what we use here at Elevator. Feel free to tailor it for your own personal.
Perfect.
Okay, Erika, let's talk about sales intake, which is the next ongoing activity that needs to take place after lead scrubbing. So let's talk about some of the things that should take place on the sales intake side. So let's talk about the workflows that would need to be set up in HubSpot to change the person from lead to MQL and what happens there next. Now, if you're working with Elevator, we're setting the transfer, that workflow of transferring the lead to MQL status.
Okay.
But then once that happens, right, you guys have to figure out what to do with that on the sales team. So what should happen? What are some of the things that should happen after that?
Yeah, so this can happen in a couple different ways. So for Elevator and for many of our clients, they have what we call a BDR role, like a business development role, where they're literally just trying to make these sequences, making these outreaches, making these calls and these attempts. This may be an actual salesperson or an account executive on your team, so it depends on how the organization is set up. But once that transfer happens and it does become an MQL, what you want to be able to do is just look very quickly to make sure that this is a good fit for the organization. If it is a good fit, we will change that to a sales accepted lead, right?
Gotcha.
Where they come into that land. What's really great about that is then you start to understand that conversion from all of the lead scrubbing that's happening on the marketing side to what does sales actually consider as a viable lead? What is sales accepted at that point?
That's a good point. And so you can use technology in HubSpot in your workflows to modify that MQL workflow to then do things like assign that to a new owner, so somebody in sales. You can also create a new deal card in your Tripwire pipeline in HubSpot. Again, if you're using HubSpot on the sales side, these are things you can do. The other things you can do if you're not using HubSpot and you're integrating with some other CRM is just toggle some sort of field that then lets the team know in their CRM, your sales team know in their CRM, that this is now a new deal opportunity, and however you set up that pipeline in your other CRM.
Right.
And then the other thing is you want to set some expectations with your sales team on what the standardized process is for processing these new MQL deals, these new Tripwire deal opportunities. So having that documented with the sales team, so that way there's an expectation that if we hand you an MQL, we know certain things are going to happen every single time.
And I think we even have in this book for them cadence of the lead follow-up waves as well.
Beautiful.
So that's just the way that we use it. Those are the sequence of events, sequence of phone calls, emails that are happening once it does become sales accepted. So you can take that, you can customize it for your organization, but at least you have a good starting point.
Great. Now let's talk about what happens From a nurturing standpoint, let's say after 4 to 6 weeks of initial outreach in the waves or the sequences that we just talked about, let's say the contact doesn't engage. Let's talk about nurturing and some things that can happen that we recommend should happen after that, to where you're doing some nurturing and trying to get you're trying to get something going. You're re-engaging. So let's talk about some of the tasks that they can set. What kind of tasks should be set up after the 4 to 6 weeks?
So for us at Elevator, if someone completes those waves in 4 to 6 weeks, what we want to do is take a look back and say, okay, is this still a very good opportunity or very good lead for the company to continue engaging with? If it is, what we'll do is we'll move them to a wait column. I think you have a preview of a funnel in here.
Yeah, there's a pipeline view that is a sample of what we have at Elevator.
Perfect. So in the very far right, we'll have different wait periods, 60, 90, and 120 days. And so based on the quality of that lead, we'll move them to a wait column, which will just put them on pause, because at this point, like I said before, they've had anywhere from 15 to 25 outreaches, and maybe it's just not a good time. Maybe it's not a high priority right now. Maybe something else came up internally, but we want to keep them on our radar. So what we'll do is we'll move them to that wait column, and then what will happen is once that wait time is complete, once 60, 90, 100 days rolls up, that lead, that deal card will actually resurface in a retry MQL column, where we'll then be able to show attention to it again. Now, depending on how you set up your marketing automation, during that wait period, maybe they're receiving other company news, right? Nurturing, right? The blog digest, newsletters, maybe other content pieces on the topic of interest that they originally engaged on, or maybe it's a different nurturing type that's closely related to that. Maybe you could speak a little bit more to that.
Yeah, you might even have like an event coming up. Let's say you're going to a trade show. This might be a great opportunity to send an announcement to your database that we're going to be at this trade show. We're going to be doing a happy hour. So just keeping your brand top of mind, I think is really important. From a nurturing standpoint, if you're going to set it up in an automated fashion, it's really important that that nurturing takes place in a way that's in alignment with the topic of interest. So let's say you have 4 or 5 major topics that you educate on. Topic A was of interest to this person, then nurture them on topic A.
Right.
Unless they indicate otherwise, unless they engage on some other topical piece of content, then continue to nurture them on topic A.
Right, makes sense.
Okay, so we talked about nurturing and re-engagement. Let's talk about the things that should be monitored on an ongoing basis to track activities. And we recommend weekly, when you stay on top of this weekly. So what are some things that we want to be monitoring on a weekly basis?
So of course there's always the very high level activities that are really important to be looking at. In your book we recommend the sequence activity, right? How many of the MQLs are being put onto those sequences, number of phone calls that are happening as a result of those sequences, number of tripwires that are taken advantage of and executed by the sales team, and then number of core offers that are out there in the marketplace, so number of leads that eventually got to that part of your pipeline. There are other things, there's everything that you can measure, right?
Right, you can measure a lot. In fact, I think that's a good point. Our philosophy is, especially when we're reporting with clients, is that we try not to focus on so much around like the individual keyword and the clicks and the likes and all that. That stuff's important to keep somewhere and look at when it's appropriate. But these big things that Erika just talked about, these are the important milestones.
Right.
So the more you can focus on the milestones, you can get a clear picture of what part of the process is broken. Instead of getting caught up in the minutia of, are we page 1 for this little phrase? You can first really keep an eye on the big milestones.
Right, and that's really important.
Yeah, we find that's just so important. I think gets lost a lot of times with all of the marketing technology and information we have at our fingertips. It can sometimes be a little paralyzing.
Right, absolutely. And of course, you can get really into, how many voicemails were left versus how many connected calls versus how, and it's great to understand where you're at with all of them. But especially at this stage in the game where you're just aligning sales and marketing, I think keeping these high level metrics are going to be the most important. They're going to be the most achievable. And then that will really tell you where you should focus on that more, nitty gritty details and metrics. But to start here is a win already.
Yeah, and then this way, sales and marketing can present a united front to the entire executive team and report on the metrics that the executive team really wants to hear. They don't want to hear about likes and pokes and shares and all this other stuff. In fact, for the executive team, those are probably the wrong conversations to be having.
Right.
But if you talk about the milestones in the journey of your customer, that's going to be of interest, and that's what's going to be valuable. And it also helps, again, center the discussion around where do we need to place our effort right now.
Right. Very important.
Cool. So in your workbook, you have a lot of examples. If you have further questions, follow up with your inbound marketing account strategist. They'll be more than happy to answer any additional questions, set up additional conversations, talk to Erika and I about other tips and recommendations. If you're not an Elevator client and you happen to be watching this, I highly recommend you get in touch with us if you'd like to talk about how to better align sales and marketing so you have better output, better ROI, and start generating qualified leads and opportunities in serious quantity.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's what we want, right?
That's always what we want.
That's what we want. Okay, great chatting with you guys today. Hope this was helpful to you. Again, this is Frank and
Erika
from Elevator. We'll chat soon. Take care.
All right. Bye now.
Bye.